Thank you for joining the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities monthly informational webinar, Developing a Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program Grant Proposal. My name is Drew Andrews. I'm the Assistant Director and Technical Assistance Coordinator at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. Our presenters today are John Williams from Okaloosa Up at Okaloosa Technical College, Shelley Bell and Judith Husband, Project SOAR at Lively Technical College in Tallahassee. Handouts can be downloaded from the chat section, which may be accessed by clicking the chat icon down at the bottom of the Zoom window. Just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. If you have difficulty hearing the presentation, phone numbers that can be used to call and join via telephone while following the slides online will also be posted in the chat window. At this time, I'll turn it over to our Executive Director, Dr. Janice Seabrooks Blackmore.
Happy New Year, everyone. And I'll just take a brief minute to make a comment. We are excited about the presentation today because we have two teams that are from career technical education. And, you know, the beauty of the work that they've done is really about collaboration. And so what you'll find in the presentation today is a lot of support from each other and the work that they've done. And more importantly, how one program got started in program development in their Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program application, and then writing their Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program Grant Proposal and share some of that. So what you'll see is an integration of how they thought through their actual program application, which comes first, to have a program grant proposal, which is helpful with the implementation. So Shelley and the crew are going to talk about that, and you'll hear a lot of collaboration and partnership that we know will be valuable to your work and thinking about how you may get started with your program application and thinking about how that integrates with the program grant. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to Lively Tech with Shelley and Judith. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So do I have the ability to share my screen? Yes, okay. Okay, so I think, hold on. Okay, so everyone should be able to see my screen now. I am Shelley Bell, and I have Judith Husband with me in my office, and I'm the director here at Lively Technical College. And so we're going to go through a little bit of kind of what we did with the application and then writing our grant. And I'm gonna start by saying, when I came into my position here at Lively, I was coming out of the K12 world where I'd served as both a middle and a high school principal. And so I had about a year under my feet as the director here at Lively. And I had somebody from the community, Allison Tant, come into my office one day and say, hey, I think you need to write this grant. I was like, what are you talking about? I really didn't know much. And I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, oh, don't worry, I'll help you. We'll get a team together. We're going to come up, write this grant because we already had a K12 transition program and it's going to be great. And I'm thinking, I'm juggling like 19 balls up in the air at any given time. Sure, Allison, let's go ahead and write this grant. And this was right as I believe COVID was kind of being a little bit more widely known. It was at the early stages of COVID. I'm thinking, sure, let's go ahead and throw this whole application and grant on us. But the team aspect of getting us up and going and rolling involved tons of stakeholders. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But to start with, I really didn't even know about what a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program was. I quickly found out to look at our community college and a program that they had. And then I started doing some research with Allison. Again, she's a community member, and some staff within our K12 school system in exceptional student education to figure out, okay, what is this? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? Because I agreed to do it, and now I need to kind of figure out what did I agree to? And so we did some background work to figure out who in the state of Florida already had comprehensive transition programs that had been approved, that had written their applications, that had their grants approved. And from there, we kind of started meeting to say, what do we want? How does this look? Let's pull a bunch of different applications from others in the state, and then let's all sit down and say, what would this look like in our community? And so that's kind of our start, where we started. For those of you on the call, I'm sure you've done some research of your own, and you understand the bill that has two components to it to make you eligible at post-secondary institutions, not just technical colleges, who can participate and have a program. And so we were lucky that we had Tallahassee Community College with their program, Equal Connection. And so we kind of started by looking at what they were doing when we said, all right, we're going to write an application. We want to get the grant. We want to get a program up and running that's going to meet the needs of our community. And so this is a little bit just more information, because like I said, when I started this process, I really didn't know much at all about what I even agreed to do. Luckily, the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities has lots of information that helped me get the ball rolling and to figure out exactly what it was I was supposed to be doing. And I'm not sure who else on the call, but in Leon County here in Tallahassee, we have a very successful K12 transition program that is held actually right next door to Lively, where our district serves students within the K12 until they're 22 in kind of a center school, where we're transitioning them into the workplace and working to help them get the skills they need to be successful in a job or career of their choice. And so I was very familiar with what our K12 transition program looked like, but this was kind of new, looking at it from the post-secondary side, and what skills and what training programs do we want to make available to individuals who would qualify for this program. And so luckily, I knew a little bit about what we were doing in K12, and so everything wasn't so foreign to me as we started working on our application. There are two main goals for all of the Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs. And the first one is expand inclusive post-secondary opportunities, includes pathways to career credentials and competitive integrated employment. So as we began to meet, this was what we were, we had our two goals. This is what we want to make sure whatever we put in our application is keeping in mind the two goals. So that's number one. And number two, to prepare students to lead a full and inclusive life in the community of their choosing. So these are the two goals that guided our work throughout our application and then the grant process, which actually made it a lot easier to keep these two goals in mind the entire process. So first, and I'm not sure, again, who's on the call, if this is just falling in your lap or if this is something you already have a team working around, but you can't do it alone. And so pulling a team together like we did to look at all aspects of both the application that you're going to write and then the grant. And so we have the same team that worked on both of those hand in hand. The application process, you want to make sure you have individuals from, if you're at a technical college or a community college, that understand everything from how you typically register a student to the budgeting process. You want to make sure you're working with your community partners and business partners, because you're making decisions in an application that's going to serve the community. And so I could simply just put on my hat and say, this is what I want to do, but what I want to do may not necessarily be best for the students or for the community. And so as a collaborative team, you're going to work together on your application, because part of that is picking out and identifying the programs that you offer. In our case, we were looking at programs that we already offered that we wanted to open up as pathways for students who would qualify in our program. Also coming up with a name. I think that's what we did first. I think actually we came up with a name, the SOAR program, in addition to having the 2 goals to kind of guide us in keeping, okay, what is the goal? What is the goal? And so our SOAR program stands for
Success for Occupational Area Readiness.
So that's Judith, who is sitting in my office with me. So that was one of the first things we wanted, was to have a name for our program, along with the 2 goals that would start guiding us as to what we wanted to do. So coming up with your creation of your team is really important. The other thing is we had to make sure, because sometimes we get out there and we'll do things. We're under a K12 system. So we have a school board and superintendent. So we kind of had to make sure they actually knew what we were doing. So making sure that they're on board and they understand, the goals of the application, what the grant would entail. So make sure they're on your advisory committee, so to speak, because there's a lot of different parts of the application and then the grant. So this just kind of gives you an overall view of some of the people that you may want to think about. But I will say the biggest part for us was having community members working alongside of us with this. They know what the jobs are in the community. They know what the specific skill sets people are looking for. And a lot of them have already had relationships working with some of the students that we were hoping to serve as part of our SOAR program. So inviting them in to be part of the process was huge. Okay, the second thing that you're going to want to focus on is kind of the research. And we started to look at other programs in the state to figure out, what are they doing? Have they been successful? What are the pitfalls that they're finding? And John, and I don't know if John's hopped on the call yet or not, but I know when Okaloosa went to start their program, I just kind of was like, hey, look at what we've done. We've already done some of the research for you. You don't need to recreate the wheel. We can help you identify areas that we struggled with, and we'll work with you. And so we sent them a lot of stuff to help get them going. But you're going to want to look at other grants. You're going to want to look at the success rates in your own school already. So if you're looking to identify, for example, that students in your program are going to be able to participate in, say, a culinary program or fundamental food service skills. Well, what are your current success rates? Are students being successful? Are they earning certification? Are they struggling? What does that program already look like before you target a program for students as part of your post-secondary transition program to be a part of?
Shelley,
Yes.
John has joined the call.
Hey, John.
Hey, Shelley, I apologize for being late. Apologize to everybody for being late, but I'll jump in there when necessary. Carry on. Great job.
Awesome. So we're just, when you're looking at the research, you just kind of need to keep everything in mind, like the success rates in the programs you're going to choose, talking to other schools that have had a program and the pitfalls that they faced. We had to start getting numbers from our finance department with dollar amounts and benefits and salaries. So there's a lot of gathering because you're going to be doing your application and then with your grant part, actually putting down numbers. And numbers keep going up every year with benefits and salaries and things like that. But the research phase, that's why you have so many people on your team that can work together and you can say, look, when we get to this part of the grant, I'm going to have you help with the budget piece. And I need you to really look at success rates for certifications. And I need you to kind of make sure that the frameworks for the program we choose match up to what we're going to ask the students to do. So there's a lot that goes into that research piece as you're looking at your application and your grant.
So one example I could give is the automotive program. You have to have your driver's license in order to be in that program. So a lot of our students coming in didn't look at that program because they knew that they wouldn't be able to do that part of it or that aspect of it. So there's all these little small things you have to like really think about before you start your program.
John, you want to add anything on the research part of it?
No, I would reiterate though, there's lots of little nuance like things like that, especially in the technical college world, that, you know, we assume students have, or, you know, assume that, you know, they would just immediately be able to do. And we need to be careful, you know, that they're going to be set up for success for any of the programs we choose for them to go into.
And then one of the things that we worked on, and I'm sure John did too, is when you're writing, this is really a team approach. And I can't say the word team enough because, as John touched, in the technical college world, there are so many little nuances. And while I may not be thinking of one thing, my person who's working with the budget or the staffing is like, okay, remember this, remember this. And so when we wrote the application, it was a very much a collaborative process. A lot of editing goes into it, a lot of reading, rereading, making sure have we really articulated exactly what we want our program to look like, to make sure that the opportunities and the programs that we're identifying for students to participate in are going to, on the back end, really help them to be successful. We definitely don't want to set up a program that the students aren't going to be successful, that doesn't lead to careers, that doesn't lead to certifications. And so as we write the abstract and started to kind of put what we all had in our mind to paper, we did struggle a little bit with some of our goals because we kind of all knew what we wanted it to look like, you know, envisioning the end result, but then backing up to get all those little pieces that are required in both the application and the grant. And the need piece was something that we really worked with our community on all of our programs to make sure that the programs we identified for students to participate in really aligned with the need in our community. So we don't want to pick a program that, one, we're already struggling to get students employed in, or two, that they don't have high success rates, or that the certification has a really low pass rate. And so there was a lot that we did in really writing it. And if you think it can be written like in a day or in a couple days, yeah, no, that's really not going to happen. This is something that has to be very well thought out, and you will go through many, many drafts. But again, use guidance from other schools that have completed both their application and their grant as your guide moving forward. Because if I had to do this with my team without having other, you know, schools, applications and grants to look at, we wouldn't have been successful. And so you definitely want to look at what other people have done. John, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add, you know, from a feeling standpoint of writing the grant, and yes, right, as a team, I think that always really begins with somebody writing a draft and starting, and then everybody giving feedback and doing that multiple times. When it gets to talking about, the need and really putting in the language for the grant, I had a unique perspective. I've now written several grants, but probably until I got into the technical college world, I was not that involved with that, with writing grants. But I did come from, a standpoint of having worked with this student population specifically. And so there's a tendency when talking about this type of student and of course their needs and their goals, it's an emotional thing. You really want to advocate well for people with special needs. But the nuts and bolts of what needs to go into the grant and the details to allow them to be successful, this isn't really, and I'm sure Drew and Janice would say this over and over if they could, this is not just a feel-good story. In fact, it's not a feel-good story at all, because it won't feel good unless these students actually get employed, unless they are actually successful in their college program. So writing it with that in mind and not letting yourself drift over into that feel-good story and emotional. I mean, I think that naturally comes as you write, for this population, but really think about the nuts and the bolts of what's going to make them successful, what's going to spell everything out for the employees at a technical college, or any college rather, what they're going to need to be ready to respond to help these students be successful.
Absolutely. And I will say that Drew and Janice were great help, because we sent them, I think, several drafts for them to look at and review. But like John said, keeping in mind, at the end of this, you want the individuals to be successful. You want them to have the skill set that's going to get them employed in the community. And it's not just about a feel-good story. Yeah, you feel good when they complete the program and they get the job, but we are wanting to make sure that we're working with them and providing the support. And the students have to do it. Like when they're in our culinary, we have a lot of students in our fundamental food service skills. Our instructors are holding them to the same expectation as our other students. We have the standards, and they want that too. They don't want to get a pass. They want, if they have this nice skill or this, baking skill, that they want to show you that they can do it as well. The other thing is, I will say, when you're picking programs, and at the technical college world, and John might find this too, a lot of our instructors don't come from the K12 background, where they have necessarily had a lot of work with students with disabilities. And so as you're looking at the programs, you want to keep that in mind too. There's a lot of training that your instructors may need, because some of them are coming straight from industry, and they don't necessarily, providing accommodations to students, not making it easier, but providing a differentiated learning or an accommodation or a mentor or getting them some extra tutoring isn't something that some of our instructors are necessarily great with. And so picking your instructors and providing them the professional development they need. And our instructors here that are part of the program, part of our SOAR program, they've been great. They want to learn more. They want to understand sometimes why this student acts in this manner, or why this student shuts down, or how can I help to motivate them. And so for our students or for our instructors that are not your traditional K12 teacher, it's been great to see them learn and become better all around instructors as part of their involvement with our SOAR students and our SOAR program. So that is something you definitely want to keep in mind, is the programs and then the instructors that students are going to be working with. Okay, on this slide, just kind of as we continue writing both your application and your grant, keeping in mind, who are you going to hire? That was something we had to work with our district on. And so some of you may find this too, if you're under the K12 umbrella. We had positions that we wanted to hire for, but they're really not even positions that our district had classifications for or didn't have job descriptions for, because this was new. It's not something that's in the K-12. So we actually had to work a lot with our HR department on understanding, once we got the application and the grant approved, being able to hire for it. And so I don't, depending on where you're from, that may be something that's out of your control from your site and may have some oversight at a district level. And then utilization of space on campus. We knew we were bringing this program in. We needed to make sure we had office space for the individuals we were bringing on board. For us, everything had to go through our school board. And so as you write your application and then your grant, if you're similar to us, you may have to make sure that your school board members understand the grant you're applying for, the application you wrote. We had to have some conversations early on with our school board chair, just to make sure, because it is different than K-12, even though we're under K-12, to make sure that they really understood what our goal was and our vision for our SOAR program. John, I don't know if you found that with your board as well.
Just starting to. I mean, we've had, you know, our board included, but just getting started with that.
And then coming, and I don't know again who all's on the call. We're into our program, so we've already, and I think John is just starting. We've already enrolled students, but how that works with the Council on Occupational Education, for those of you that are COE or COE accredited, making sure that we just had our visit, our 5 or 6 year visit, and making sure they understood what the program was about, how it operated within our school, the enrollment process, how students' payment were deferred. So there was a lot making sure that they understood that. And then, of course, on the back end, as you hire and you implement, thinking ahead of time of how are you going to evaluate and monitor the success of the program, the success of the students. What are your measures going to be? Looking at perhaps early on how many students you want to enroll, what you would like your completion rates to be, if you're picking programs where there's an industry certification or credential tied to it, and then ultimately placement upon completion of the program. So you want to think of those evaluative measures the entire way through both the application and the grant process. And we use Focus. So Focus really will, and I don't know if everyone is or what your SIS is, but Focus, our student information system, really helps us to be able to track, obviously, the industry certifications, and then we keep placement data, completion data, and the enrollment. So it's easy for us to pull data as we need it on our students.
Another thing that we're working on right now is an exit survey for the students who have completed. We want to know what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and how we can get better as a program for the students who will be enrolling for next year.
And so with our current cohorts of students that are enrolled in the program, we do have very strong lines of communication. They know who they can turn to for help, but because we're still new at this, that feedback piece that Judith mentioned, and talking to our students about what they liked, what they didn't like, how we can continue to make it better, I think is really important for us moving forward. The budget, we've had probably out of everything that we've had, maybe our biggest struggles with, it's been with the budget. And that's just because when we started with the application and the grant, you have in your mind kind of, well, I'll budget this much for salaries. And then you know that there's the piece for, making sure the students' tuition is covered. But this has been, because it's new for both myself, for Judith, for our business office, kind of working through the reporting aspect of it. So I hope as you write this, whoever your CFO is or your business manager that you really work really closely with them. And Judith will come and say to our business office, like, I need help with this. We've got to do this report. But there's been a learning curve when it comes to understanding, one, the budget that we wrote in our grant and making sure we're implementing it, and then just on the reporting piece.
And one thing you can't do is predict an actual number. So you don't really know how many students are coming into your program. So you're guessing on what you need as far as personnel goes, as far as funding goes, as far as supplies even go. Luckily, we started our program and we had some extra funding from the half of the year before that we weren't able to enroll students. So we had the amount of supplies and technology that we needed. But then about mid-year, we were thinking in November, like, we need a job coach. Do we have any money for that? Well, we didn't know that we would have 12 students our first year. So we didn't think we would need additional personnel. So you can't plan for an exact number, but I would say if I was writing a grant today, like, I would think, like, I would aim high.
Yeah, we did not. We kind of aimed low because we just really didn't know what to expect. But it was really popular. And because of our community partnerships, everyone was talking about it. And then I'd get calls, hey, do you still have, can we bring this student? Or I've got a friend who's bringing a student. And so Judith and I at first were like, well, how popular do we think it's going to be? What do we think our enrollment's going to be? And I think we thought we'd have 5 students enrolled the first semester, and we had 12. And so that's a good thing. But the budget, that we had some issues there. John, do you want to touch anything on the budget? I don't know if you guys are that far along.
I would just emphasize that, to over prepare and plan and utilize the funds that are there. You're providing a service in a lot of cases. I know up here for us in the Panhandle that is not really offered. So I would anticipate in most places, you're going to have the experience that Shelley had where people are going to come out, in droves, and either you're going to have to turn people away or try to find ways to fit them in. And obviously more personnel is key, and to send money in that direction, at least to start. It's surprisingly, I think there are more resources and materials and supplies and things already in-house ready for these students. It's the people, and of course the right people, to work and support the other programs and help these students. So I reiterate that point.
I also think that being a technical college, that students with disabilities think, well, this is hands-on learning and that's what I'm good at. So I think that they're more apt to come to a program like this versus a more academic program, because they feel like they're going to get the support and they're going to learn from their hands and not necessarily from a book.
And we've already learned that word travels fast. So our first group is people, community partners who already work with those students are hearing about their success. We're starting to have more people come through our doors. Hey, when's your next enrollment period? Checking out our website, calling and asking questions. Because even though we have a program of academic in nature next door at our community college, our program provides that hands-on that really, like Judith said, the students are excited about and they're successful with. Getting final approval, hiring and initiating the plan. We kind of started this during COVID, which I was ready to pull my hair out because I'm thinking, okay, we agreed to do this. We got approval of the application and the grant. And oh my gosh, now I got to hire at some point. I don't even think we were in school.
Yeah, virtual.
We were virtual for a little bit. So, we threw this in on top of everything. But working together, we have been, I think, for our start, pretty successful. But the key person for us was hiring a coordinator, and we were lucky to get Judith Judith Husband to be our coordinator. And she has a background in exceptional student education. And I would say, and John's lucky that John has a background in exceptional student education, but bringing someone in who understands the population of students we're serving and who also already had a lot of partnerships with community members and community advocates is really key. I remember writing the job description and sending it to our district HR staff, and they're like, do we even have anyone that can do this? And I said, well, we're going to find somebody that can do this. Looking at our current population of individuals within our district, because the description we wrote and we submitted for approval for advertisement was much different than anything we had in our district, because we were going to bring someone in to essentially start a brand new program. We needed that individual to have an understanding of exceptional student education, but also of the grant writing process, the accountability that goes with getting a grant up and going, and then be able to establish and maintain relationships with community partners, because it's not just about working here at Lively to recruit students, it's about going out into the community and letting a lot of our nonprofits, a lot of our agencies that work with individuals with disabilities, working with sometimes their caretakers, sometimes their guardians, to help them to understand what we're doing. So finding the right person is really critical. Because like I said at the beginning, I'm always juggling 19, 20 balls in the air. I want to be a critical part of this program, but I also know that I can't devote 100% of my attention to it. I would love to, but I can't. I have a lot of other hats that I'm wearing, but bringing someone in who was gonna live, eat, drink our SOAR program was really important for us. Of course, we also had to work with our district on a salary. That's another thing you're gonna find if you're like us under a district. And they say, well, what about a teacher salary? Nope, I'm not hiring somebody at a teacher salary. And this is more an administrative role. And so having a lot of those conversations with our HR and our hiring managers was critical for us. And then initiating the plan. Again, I said we started this during COVID. So we're like, okay, how are we going to recruit students? We still had students learning at home. We had masks. Everyone was wearing masks. So one of the first things we said is we need to create a website. We want to get materials published. We want to get out on social media. And Judith was great. We're like, we got to get some swag for this program. We want students to come in excited. So we got a logo designed. We got our website. We put as much information with applications and everything we could on our website. Because again, it was during COVID and a lot of people weren't necessarily walking through our doors. And so anything we could do electronically and then send the messaging out that way for us starting was really important. And I will say, I think one of the first things we did was get our logo designed, and we started branding that and putting it all at, anybody that had a nonprofit that dealt with adults with intellectual disabilities, we wanted to get that in front of them. And then as much as we could start getting Judith out or on a Zoom, we started getting her out in the community to talk about this new program that Lively was proud to offer. And so depending on what happens with COVID in the state and in the community, for those of you that are getting ready to start your programs or looking at it, just keep that in mind, that initially people, depending on what your COVID rates are in your community, which at one point Tallahassee was a hot spot when we started this, getting them through our doors wasn't necessarily happening. And honestly, for us, when we can bring someone into our building and we can show them our food service program and walk them through and they see the facility, they're sold. And so having to change that up and do a lot of virtual visits with potential students and their community agencies kind of threw us for a loop. But like we said, we started with more students than we anticipated.
The most important thing for me was meeting with transition students who are having their transition IEPs. So I used to work as a program specialist for behavior in the district. So all of the compliance specialists I knew. And so anybody that was at high school as a compliance specialist, I would reach out to them and say, please invite me to this, students meeting. If there's any student with an intellectual disability, please invite me to their meeting. And that's where a lot of our students came from. So that relationship with your school district is like the main piece of recruitment, honestly.
John, you want to touch on recruiting at all?
Yeah, I would say, recruiting and definitely with the transition coordinator, or whether it's a staffing specialist from the K12, school, we're very fortunate here that that person actually is on our campus, and we're very lucky as a team member. And so, giving guidance back out to all of those, whether they're case managers or to staffing specialists. I know that's the title that we have here of who helps manage those IEPs back to K12. That is the critical area, the critical person for that. I would also say there's a lot of conversations to be had about deferring diplomas. In our district, I think that's a conversation that happens where they defer to be able to go to different programs. And for our case, of course, for this grant, they cannot defer. They would have to have graduated and be ready for post-secondary. And just to make sure that that's reiterated out to when advertising, because I think there's some confusion out there about what's entailed and how they can arrive in these programs at post-secondary level.
Absolutely. And then the follow-up and ongoing monitoring. So that's why I have Judith. Judith is great. She makes sure that what we put in our application and our grant we're doing. And she, like I said, it's so important that you get the right person to manage this at your site, because they're the ones who are going to have the open line of communication. They're the ones who will problem solve. I'm lucky that I can just say, sometimes last minute, Judith, can you handle this? She's got it. Working very closely with our teachers, working closely with the students, the staff that are part of the program, because our intent is every year we just want to keep growing and growing and growing our program. We already have seen the success our students have had in our first cohort. And John touched on it. I mean, there's a real need for programs like our SOAR program and like the Okaloosa Up program to serve students who have, the potential to go out in our community and have very successful careers and find something that they're passionate about. But you got to make sure what you put in your grant, you're actually doing. And so that ongoing monitoring and, Judith has great lines of communication with Drew and Janice and Iris. And if there's something that she's not sure about, she's going to call. Great thing is that whole crew, when you're writing your application and your grant, they will answer your questions. You can call them with all your questions. They're on it. So that was a great for us as we began this process in getting the application and then the grant up and writing. But you have to continue to work with your team the entire way. As a matter of fact, we had a call earlier today with a group that works with special populations in our community, where we're always able to share, this is what's going on. They partner with us and they want to know how our first group of students were. The one that we keep getting asked about is, are you going to add any more programs? So when we wrote our initial grant for SOAR, we picked 6 of our programs for students to be eligible to enroll in. Of course, they want us to open it up to all 30 of our programs. And eventually that may happen, but we wanted to start small and make sure that we kind of took baby steps and picked programs that we felt really positive that our students would be successful in and that would lead to job placement. And gradually, yes, we will keep listening and hopefully adding more programs.
I've
But
even had teachers call me and say, well, why didn't you put my program as part of your grant? Like, I want these students in my program as well. You know, they felt like they were missing out. So it's really neat to see that, you know, people really care about the program and they also want to be involved in it.
so continue working with your team. We have a leadership kind of group here at Lively at our technical college, and Judith is the coordinator. SOAR is part of that. And so as we have, you know, things that arise on our campus, on our college campus, Judith is very much a part of that. The students that are in the program, other students don't necessarily know. It's not like they're walking around and we said, this is a SOAR student, this is not a SOAR student. And so that's great that the students are held to the same standards as all of our other students. And then the community, and I've touched on the community partnerships, but I think what's been most rewarding for me in my position is not just seeing how our teachers and how the students, but the family members and oftentimes the guardians of the individuals that are participating, thanking us because they're, you know, they've told us, I didn't think there was anything for my child, or I didn't know what I was going to do when they left the K12 system. I didn't know that, you know, they would have the possibility to go to college, Lively Technical College, and then go out and have a career. So it's been great to see how we've been received, not just by the students and the staff, but really by the entire community and the caretakers and the parents and the guardians. And so that's kind of, I think my last slide just talks about who we are, but we're still new at this. I know John's new with this. We're new here at Lively. It's something we took on, as I mentioned, during COVID. And so we're still learning, but we are here to help. And I know we have our contact information, and Judith is, and myself, and I know John and Joe were happy to have other conversation with individuals to share with them what we did, our applications, our grants, and work collaboratively with others who may want to get a program up and going. John, you want to add anything?
Just reiterating, yes, absolutely would love to help any college out there. I have a great passion for this population of students and really came in with that to the technical college world as opposed to being a technical college person, you know, welcoming in this population. And so I'm very passionate about seeing these students get into the workforce, get into the college world and have success. And if there's anything that I could do for any of your up and start programs or established programs, just sharing any information, I sure would like to. And then I just reiterate, I got a lot of help, certainly from the center, but also kudos to Shelly Bell and her team. They were a huge help. And so if I could reciprocate that or pass that off and pay it forward to somebody else, I sure would appreciate the opportunity to help any one of you. And good luck with your program and your grant writing.
Okay, Drew and Janice, do we turn it back over to you or questions?
You can't, Shelley, I just want to say what an amazing job. Thank you. Thank Judith. Thank you, John. Thank all of you for just the great information that you've shared. So if you don't mind, we have a little bit of time for a few questions. So participants, you can either unmute yourself and verbally ask, or if you would like to ask in the chat window, I will try to monitor that for any questions anyone might have.
Hey, this is Jane Greenfield here in Tallahassee. Hey, Shelley and John and everybody. I put in the chat, oh, thank you, because I wanted to see the logo design and so I did. I went out there and I found that page, but that's beautiful. That's what I really wanted to see. So thank you. And Shelley and Judith, I probably need to schedule some time to come over and make a visit. So
Awesome. Very good.
Absolutely.
I was wondering if, do you two questions actually. Do you happen to include students with autism as well as students with intellectual disabilities? And what kind of paperwork do you need for them to show? Do you need an independent psychological evaluation for you to determine that they have an intellectual ability, or what does that look like?
So we do accept students with autism, even if they don't have a label of intellectual disability, as long as their IQ is below 70. So yes and no, I guess, is the answer to that. We do require that we have proof in a psychological report, the Psych of Ed report, that their full scale is below 70.
And can that psychological report be one that was done in the K12 environment, or do they have to get a separate psychological once they age out or defer?
That's up to your institution as to how you answer that question. We take ones that are a little bit older, but as long as you feel like they're comparable to what the student is like today. So it doesn't have to be within a year necessarily, but that's up to your institution as to what you want to take for that evaluation. You need a score of below.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'd agree with all those, just so you know, we are in the same boat with each of those answers.
Thank you, John. Other questions that someone might have? I just want to share with folks, and as Shelley mentioned, that there is SOAR, the Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program on Lively Technical College campus. And then right next door, there's a Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program at Tallahassee Community College. And our goal here at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities is for there to be opportunities throughout the state. And it's just a wonderful example of how this can work, because some students choose as Shelley mentioned, a technical college because they like the things that you can learn and the credentials that you can earn there. And other students choose a state college because that's where their goals can best be met. So it's a great example to see both of those programs.
And I want to comment on, Kim, you asked the question that a lot of institutions ask about documentation and the combination of students with intellectual disabilities and particularly autism. And Judith gave an excellent answer, an excellent response. And it is really up to your institution on how you do that. But that's one that Drew and I get often with every program that is seeking the opportunity to start. Every institution is seeking the opportunity to start a program. So that's right up your alley. You really have to decide. And then Marlene asked about the age limit. That's another attribute that you would need to decide as an institution. We have some of our programs limited to 18 to 26. We have some that have no age limit, because we have had students in our programs over 50. And so it really depends on your area and the students or the citizens you're trying to meet their needs. And so you have to really think about who are we going to include in this program? Who will we allow the opportunities? Would it be just like all of our other programs, or would there be an age limit? So Marlene, that's another common question you and Kim both ask. Some good questions that other programs do question about.
So Jen, I just want to clarify then, if we as a district decide that we want to allow students that have a diagnosis of autism, but their IQ is not below 70, that would be allowable within the grant, or it would not be allowable?
No, the program, and for the program, so the grant comes after the program is approved. So the approval of the program, it has to be for students with intellectual disabilities.
I got you. Thank you very much.
Yes,
And
good question. Mhm.
Kim, or whoever asked about the age limit, the reason why we chose not to put a limit on our age is that when a typical student walks through our doors for Lively, there is no age limit.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
And I
Very
think
good.
our oldest student right now in our program is 40.
He's 36.
Right now we is 36.
Mhm. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Well, again, this has been such great information. If you would, in the chat box, you'll see that there is a link to the evaluation. And if you could complete that, we would greatly appreciate that. So we'll know how to prepare additional webinars just like this webinar today in the future. And then you'll be receiving an email, because all of our webinars are recorded and then are posted on our website under events. And so if you're interested to know what information is there on other topics, there is a wealth of information there over a couple of years, and lots of great topics that if you're interested in a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program that can help answer your questions. Also, as Shelley mentioned, Drs. Janice Seabrooks Blackmore and myself are both here, as well as our staff at the center, and happy to help answer any questions. We do support you through the process of your program application all the way to approval. And we also support you through your grant proposal until you're funded. And then maybe one last thing that I don't know if we covered today, and maybe I missed it, was that we also provide student scholarships that are $7,000 a year to all students with intellectual disabilities who are enrolled in an approved program. And so the legislation was really very well designed, and really it says a lot about our state and how they value students with intellectual disabilities who are looking for post-secondary opportunities. Nationally, we have lots of folks very interested in what we're doing. We had some great legislators that really worked hard to see this put in place. Dr. Seabrooks Blackmore, do you have anything to say before we adjourn and end the webinar?
No, we were just excited about the two presenters, the two schools sharing their information, because we know how what dynamite speakers they are. John and Shelley, we really appreciate you. And Judith, sharing about your programs and bringing it home to what's important. The primary group that's here joining us today are those from school districts and career technical education centers. So I think you did a great job really emphasizing some of the key factors that they need to consider. Thank you so much for your time.
Everyone have a wonderful evening. And again, we'll have a webinar each month. Good day.
All right.